Hello and welcome to I'll Knit If I Want To. I'm Andrea Mowry of Andrea Renee Knits, and this is a little weekly podcast where I do my best to answer some of your questions. Today I am wearing Nebula, one of my recent pattern releases. Firing on all cylinders. You can't really see it because I have a bandana on too, but it's cute little rounded drop hem, oversized. This one actually has like over 20 inches of positive ease on me. So very oversized, very comfortable, cute little short sleeves. Perfect for multiple seasons. And my favorite thing has been, y'all have been knitting these up quick. I've seen people knitting them up in like a weekend, which I love. I mean, how fun. So, let's do some questions. Oh yeah, this is knit up in Farmer Starter Fibers. Oh dang, DK. All right, questions. Question number 1. I started the Stria cardigan this week. I'm loving the squish factor of fisherman's rib. My question is, all the contrast color ends for the stripes run down one side. Did you weave them all in? Or since I will be picking up stitches along the front, can I just tie and knit the 2 strings for each contrast color stripe since that edge will be hidden? So it is some ends to weave in. If you know a fancy knot that you can trust, I suppose you could do that. Things I would take into consideration. Just a square knot, just a knot will probably unravel at some point. It's just not going to stand the test of time like weaving in your ends would. I personally wove in all my ends. It's also something you can do as you go. So like every few inches, go back to like 2-3 stripes ago and weave in the ends for that one. And then keep going just to make it a little less daunting when you get to the very end. I lost my other. What else? Wow, it really just flew out of my head. The other thing I wanted to say to think about. If you tied them all together. Whew, gone. Totally gone. Yeah. So I would basically just be, if you're going to wear it open, came back. If you're going to wear it open, just considering sometimes our cardigans, that one does lay like pretty well. I don't feel like I've ever had my front flap inside out, like waving around. But that would be the only other thing I would consider is how tidy you want that to be on the inside. So if you're wearing it open and people could see the inside, would that bother you? So another thing I would think about. But, whew, this is gonna be interesting. Okay, question number 2. I think your new patterns, Nebula and Brume, are so lovely and I want to knit both. Well, thank you. I started spinning this year and I'm wondering if there's any way to spin a yarn similar to the lovely Oh Dang. Am I crazy to even try to attempt this? I have spindle spun and spun on the wheel and my long draw is coming along. What kind of yarn, fiber should I try to spin to get some of the gorgeous fluff in these? Oh, I see. So yeah, what kind of fiber should I try to spin to get some of the gorgeous fluff in these patterns? I don't know, to be honest. I have not spun anything like these. I am sure there are people who have done something with some fluff. There are definitely yarns, like my friend Melly was just talking about. She used to spin a ton of Icelandic kind of Lopi style yarn, those like barely twisted kind of singles, and was saying how those really fluff up, kind of similar to an Oh Dang DK. But I just don't have experience with that. What popped into my head was, if you do want to spin and you're like, I really want to spin for these patterns, what I would do is consider marling. So did I do it for both? Yes. Yep. So for both Brume and Nebula, I did a second one where I held Odang lace with a strand of either sport or fingering weight. And so what you could do is you could spin up a sport or fingering weight wool yarn and then just hold it double with the lace weight fluff of your choice, such as Odang lace. And that would also give you the option to maybe play around with color. It would be delightful with a woolen spun if you've been doing long draw, but that way you don't necessarily have to replicate the fuzz, which in those yarns is generally anchored around a core of silk. But I do recommend the book. I have it over on my shelf. Spinner's Book of Yarn Design, maybe? I will get the proper name in there and I will link it below. But I mean, it really goes into all the yarns. And so that would be where I would reference to try and figure out how to do that. So if you're like, listen, I'm up for the challenge, I want to figure this out, that's the book I would reference. So I will go ahead and link that for you below so you can check it out, because honestly, it's a great book to have in your spinner's library if you are a book person. All right, next question. I'm working on the Tesselated cardigan and have subbed in a sport weight non-superwash yarn for the main color. I made a swatch and obtained the correct gauge. Since non-superwash yarn doesn't grow as much as superwash, should I knit the body an inch longer than the pattern instructs? You've mentioned that the body will grow an inch or so after blocking, which I imagine has to do with the superwash yarn used in your sample. My swatch did not grow much after blocking. Would you steam block before splitting for the yoke? Move stitches to waste yarn and wet block, since that is how I will wash the sweater when finished. I really want to love this item when it's finished. So I think your sweater's still gonna grow. The yarns I used, even though they are superwash, have a very tight twist on them, and they don't act like your typical soft superwash yarn. They have got some tooth to them that I have found helps them stand up a lot more than a regular superwash yarn. And they did still grow. One of the things that's adding to that growth is just the slip stitch nature of that pattern. It tends to kind of all hug up on itself while you're knitting it, and once it takes a bath, it's going to relax a little bit. So I think you hit the nail on the head with doing either of those things. I think a steam block could be good enough, but it depends on you and your personality. And so if you are very precise and you're like, this has got to be right, then I would probably throw it on some waste yarn or stitch like that, those silicone stitch holders, and go ahead and wet block the body. And just make sure it's really, really the length you want it to be. I think you could do either of those things. If it were me, I would probably just do the steam block. But if you don't mind doing the wet block, it's going to be the truth. It's going to tell you how much it's going to grow. It's take into consideration too that once you add the yolk doesn't end like right tucked up in your armpit. So that adds a little, like that drops it down a little bit. So once you check it, you can even then take your tape measure and measure out the yoke. Just hold your tape measure along the whole thing, and that way you can really see like, oh, okay, this is how long this is gonna be, and it's where I want it to be. All right. I just took a pretty big plunge and invested in the Farmer's Daughter's fiber. Oh, dang. I'm very excited. Regular mohair can really agitate my tactile sensitivity, and Surrey doesn't. However, I am now facing a bit of indecision. I was planning on knitting the long sleeve Nebula, but I also love the design of the DK Weekender. Ideally, I'd like to have the high-low hem and balloonish sleeves of the Nebula with the faux seam of the Weekender. Do you have any suggestions for blending these patterns? Which pattern would you recommend using for gauge and stitch count, etc.? So, honestly, I would just do the Nebula, because so when I designed Brume, which is knit in the same yarn, I had these fun detailed raglans on that sweater, and they completely got lost. This is such a textured yarn that I think your faux seams, they're gonna get a little bit lost in it, so I don't know if it's worth the fiddle. personally. But if you're like, no, I'm doing it, I've made up my mind and I want to mash these bad boys together, then I think what I would do, so you like the high-low. So for the weekender, there is a bit of a high-low hem going on. The back hem does drop lower than the front, but it's a squared off split hem. It's not a rounded hem. So if what you love is the rounded hem, you basically have two options. You could just knit the DK weekender per the instructions. You could always drop the back hem a little lower if you want it to be even longer, like a more dramatic difference between front and back, but it would still be squared off. You'd get your faux seams. And then for the sleeve, to have it be more of a balloon sleeve, you would just do not do any decreases until you get to right before you're going to start the ribbing for the cuff, and then do one big round of decreases to cinch it closed a little bit, and then do your cuff. Or, which is going to be more complicated, but you could do Nebula, and what you would want to do is you're just going to make, you need to find your center seam, so the middle of this sweater, and you would find that stitch and you'd put a stitch marker on either side, and you would do that in the back too, and you would know, okay, this can be my slip stitch seam. And then what I would do is I would make the purl side the right side of that sweater, or you will not see that faux seam. It's just going to get lost if you try to keep it on the knit side. So you're basically going to want to have this side, try not to flash everybody, be the right side of your work, and you're going to slip your stitch every other round, and have it be a knit stitch instead of a purl stitch on that side. I feel like I'm making this confusing. It's like it all makes sense in my head, but as I start rattling it off, I'm like, does it make sense? But yeah, that's what so you can do either of those options. And then just knit the rest as it's meant to be, just continuing that slip stitch all the way up the front and back center. So whatever you decide, I hope you love it. You can always knit both, and just have them be different. That's an option too. Okay, last question. I'm thoroughly in love with the Tesselated cardigan. I'd love to knit it with one modification. Rather than having it be a V-neck, I'd love to knit the front straight up to the neck. I'm assuming it would be a matter of eliminating decreases where the V-neck begins. Would I be correct? Any other thoughts? So my question to you is, are you then thinking you want it to be a boat neck? If you are thinking I'm just going to have it be a straight up boat neck where this is straight across, then yeah, technically you could take out that V-neck shaping, and you just need to make sure that you are mirroring the short rows of the back, which are already written into the pattern. I honestly don't think you'd really need to do anything. What I would do is I would just place stitch markers for like, what are my shoulder stitches, which you can jump ahead to where it's like the 3 needle bind off for the shoulders and see how many stitches you bind off for your side and count in that many stitches. And I would place markers, and that way you would know anything from there over is your neck stitches, and you're just going to leave them as is. I would end up doing a thing of ribbing across the top to make it cohesive, same as the back. You're basically going to knit the front the same as the back, but you're knitting a half at a time. But that would give you a boat neck cardigan, if that's what you're looking for. If what you're looking for is a crew neck as opposed to a V-neck, now we're talking about something different, completely different. You could maybe use the Tesselated pullover as a guide to rounding that neck. Again, you would need to be really comfortable with modifications because you are going to be doing it a half at a time. And I don't know that their gauges match, but it would probably be good enough. But yeah, basically what you are going to want to do, and you can find tutorials for like crew neck bind offs, but basically what you would do is you would bind off a chunk of stitches when it's to the depth you want it, which is usually at least like 3 inches below like the top of the shoulder. So you would bind off a chunk of stitches, And then you'd bind off, like on the next go around, you would do like 4 and then 3 and then 2 and then 1. And that might be good enough. You might have to decrease a few more to get that kind of rounded line. I like a sloped bind off where you do this. Is it called a sloped, or I think it is. Instead, because if you just bind off, boop, boop, you're gonna have these little steps. But there's a method you can use that again, you would refer to the Tesselated pullover. I can't remember if I did it in the cardigan on the back neck. I might have. Look and see if the back neck, wish I had it up in front of me. Can't remember if I did it or not. But basically you're going to slip the last stitch on the wrong side so that when you go to do the bind off, the first 2 stitches you just slip and then bind off a stitch by just pulling it over the top and off. And it does this really nice curve instead of having like steps. But you could always Google a tutorial and play with it. It can be done. You'll just need to be comfortable with modifications. And remember, you also want to think about like a selvage stitch on the edge. So it would also just be a matter of staying in pattern, but you can always just look below if you're comfortable with that to keep matching up your pattern as you go. You can do it. If it's a boat neck, pretty easy peasy. If it's a crew neck, it'll be exciting. All right, and that was the last question. All right, look at us go. So, very, very, very exciting news. Next week, just a few days away, we launch the 2024 Rhinebeck sweater. So if you are not already signed up, now is the time to go sign up for my newsletter. There's a link pretty much at the top of the show notes below. I recommend signing up, especially because the next month, just a few weeks away, is my annual birthday sale. And you do not want to miss that. It's my biggest sale of the year. I've done it every year since I started, and it's so much fun. So run, don't walk, sign up for the newsletter, and keep an eye on your inbox for next week because I can't wait. This one, whew, it put me through the ringer. I had to dig deep. I really wanted it to be, I always want it to be special, but I just was like, come on, Andrea. And it kind of broke my brain. I started over a lot of times with different ideas. Oh my gosh, the amount of things I charted. But it's one of those things where it's like, then you get to the other side and you're like, whoa, I did it. I made this. This is cool. So anyways, I can't wait to share it with you. I hope that you have a super great weekend, and I hope to see you back here next week. Bye.